The previews, the final flying of the test pilot's course, have ended. All that now remains is graduation.
Perhaps I arrived here with a little bit of apprehension about doing the job of a test pilot, and I've certainly got enough confidence now to go ahead and give that a go.
I've flown 19 types on the course in about 170 hours, and there's nowhere else that you could get that sort of flying experience apart from at a test pilot school. So yes, it's been outstanding.
They told me it's going to be a lot of work, sleepless nights, but, you know, they didn't tell me the truth. This is awful lot of work over here, you know.
For the past 2 weeks, the student test pilots, divided into syndicates, have been testing a wide range of operational aircraft, none of which they have flown before. Each syndicate was allotted 10 hours of flying time to probe the limits of the aircraft as test pilots. The flying was from bases as far apart as Lossiemouth in Scotland, Odium in Hampshire, and Patuxent River, Maryland, USA. One of the pilots testing an American aircraft was the senior student, Robin Tidyman. How has the course changed him from a squadron to a test pilot?
Well, for someone who isn't yet a test pilot, we're only about 9/10 of the way through the course. I suppose the difference is that on the squadrons, you're just given a task to do, and despite the aeroplane, you have to go out and do it. And from everything that we've seen here, perhaps our job is to now go out and do the same tasks, but this time try to find out what problems are with the aeroplane and try to make sure those problems perhaps are not there in the future.
From the scattered bases, the students return to the test pilot school at Boscombe Down in Wiltshire. The previews may be over, but there are still 2 heights to be scaled. The first, writing up the reports in just 10 working days, which means many working nights, to produce what amounts to a complete aircraft manual. To the last, the pressure is maintained, as it will be when the students are working test pilots. Then all reports will be urgent.
I can't expose the report to you, as you know, because it is restricted. But you will see, although it is full of words and not just pictures, and it's all written by the chaps in hard work, perhaps, and the detail to which they actually construct. Perhaps if we go down to one of the annex, is in here. I can probably show you, even to things like drawings of the cockpit that they've put together to make it a readable volume. I don't think I need to say any more, really. It is absolutely packed full of facts, and to be able to produce that in 10 working days, I feel, is quite a feat.
If I'm going to work this hard again, I have to earn a lot more money to do it, you know.
It has been extremely hard work. A lot of good stuff in there, but I'll never do a course like this again.
I think I can safely say I'm never going to work this hard again, because if I do, I shall die.
The course is difficult, and if a man doesn't meet the requirements, he wouldn't pass it. It's not fair to him to put him out into to fly in situations he might not be capable of handling, and it's not fair to our customers either to do this. So he must reach the standard. But having said that, as I said, the selection procedure does ensure that we do get good people, and in general, they do pass. And people come here very worried about the level of the course. I indeed was very worried about the level. My academic qualifications were low to on the course. However, I came on it, I passed it, and I was taught what I needed.
Although the students' families live in married quarters just outside the base, one of the very few occasions which included the wives was the annual cricket match. But it is not only security which separates families.
All the wives have been complaining because the fellas will finish work here about 5 o'clock and go home. And the first thing they'll do is walk in through the door, say, "Hello, dear," straight upstairs to the bedroom or the study or whatever, and start writing, because there's so much to do.
Although we disappear off to work at 8:30 in the morning and normally home by 6 in the evening, you get home and then you probably, as I say, work till midnight or later with a quick half-hour break for dinner, so that the wives actually see very little. And the same applies at weekends. That there's sometimes some weekends where I just had to work all through the weekends as well.
I think for us, it's not such a bad deal. Well, we soon slot into this way of life. You sort of work all day, go home, eat, and work all evening. I think it's worse for the wife and the kids, because all of a sudden Dad is not around go and play football, that sort of thing. And they've really got not much else to do.
Despite their discontent, the only wife to speak was Madame Aubert, and her criticism was mild.
It's a very hard year for my husband and also for all the family, and all the families here. I am very happy for Serge because he wants to be test pilot since a long time, and I am very happy that he became test pilot.
But Serge is not yet a test pilot, for he and Les, having submitted their report, now prepare for the final hurdle, which is in many ways the most daunting of all, the formal presentation to an expert audience.
There's a lot of difference between writing reams of facts and words and then getting the facts across to an audience in 30 minutes. And it's a different technique, which is why we do a presentation, so they can see both ends of their art, both communication and written work.
For their presentation, Les and Serge tested the Phantom at Coningsby. That was to prove to be the easy bit. Now at Boscombe Down in the secure theatre, the critical audience awaits to hear the presentation. Les is anxious, for he and Serge had a less than successful reception to their previous presentation earlier in the course. They are fervently hoping that this far more important occasion will be rather better received.
Good morning, sir. Ladies and gentlemen. Following a Ministry of Defence requirement for new air defence aircraft, a team from the A&AE Boscombe Down was tasked to perform a preview assessment of the Phantom FGR Mark II. The team comprised Commandant Serge Aubert of the French Air Force and myself, Squadron Leader Les Evans. We were to assess the aircraft for its suitability as an all-weather air defence aircraft, as an interceptor and air superiority fighter. During this presentation, which is classified restricted, we will look at the performance of the aircraft and of its weapon systems.
The Phantom presentation has begun well. The visual aids are being cued slickly, and there is no doubt that Les and Serge have secured the full attention of their audience, in contrast to their earlier effort, which Les himself described as a shambles. The quality of the presentation could, even at this late stage, affect their successful completion of the course. They are well aware that every fact, every figure is being weighed and considered.
Well, we're looking from two aspects, what we call quantitative and qualitative data. One is just straight numbers, obviously, and anybody can collect numbers. We could probably send a monkey to collect the numbers. However, what we need is qualitative impressions and from the chap in the cockpit, the test pilot, such that he can see whether things are natural to do, the reactions of the aircraft, so we can build up a picture, a true picture. After all, a man will be flying the airplane, and therefore we need a skilled observer to tell us at an early stage if there are any problem areas.
The field of view from the front cockpit was measured on the ground and assessed in the air, both close formation and in combat.
A fighter pilot's field of view is clearly vital. It could well form a problem area to be picked up by a test pilot.
Angle of attack gauge and angle of attack donut took up prime space, and arcs of 6 degrees width to the left and 10 degrees width to the right were obscured.
Many of those present have a detailed knowledge of the Phantom and its faults, but test pilots often have to argue a case to convince a skeptical audience who have no first-hand experience of the test aircraft.
He's got to be able to convince people that his results are facts, that he is right, and we're talking about large sums of money, of course, in some cases, to modify aircraft that are already existing.
That concludes our presentation. I'll invite questions from the floor, which I'd ask you to direct through me.
In Defence Standard 00970, there's a specification criteria by which you can define how satisfactory or unsatisfactory the SPO is.
Yeah.
Can you say why you didn't use those criteria to reinforce your recommendations?
Yes, certainly. We looked, for those who don't know, the criteria lays down a chart against which a plot of the natural SPO frequencies against the N-alpha, the relationship between applied G and incidence.
The questions are highly technical and are deliberately framed to probe the depth of the student's understanding of the test aircraft. The answers will be assessed and marked as part of the presentation as a whole.
7 degrees per unit, but that was purely off one document which really only referred to one particular speed.
Your reason for using rudder was only to increase the roll rate, for no other reason?
Yes, only to roll the aircraft.
So what would happen then to a pilot that reached those angle attack above those 15 units?
The question and answers continued for some time, but at last, to the relief of Serge and Les, it was all over. In the audience were the two instructors from Coningsby. They have more experience of the Phantom than anyone in the room.
There are some obvious deficiencies in it, which most people find, but certainly with the work they've done on the 2 weeks they were there, they've highlighted certainly the other areas that even people, I think, that are just coming onto the aircraft don't realise that you have problems with it. So, you know, I was quite impressed, in fact, what they pick up in the short time they're there.
Came up with terms while we were flying, which I just couldn't believe, about short-term loops and things like this, and now I understand what they meant. But they certainly picked up a lot more very, very quickly. People who've been flying it for 1,000 hours. I was quite surprised.
How do you feel? Very relieved, actually. It's a tremendous feeling to have finished, actually got it all behind us.
I feel heureux. Happy.
For the second syndicate, it is yet to be. The Chinook helicopter presentation by 3 of the rotary wing students is next, and its low-level performance will form a major part of the presentation.
Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome to our preview presentation on the Chinook helicopter. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lieutenant Alan Howden. Can I introduce to you Captain J.T. Coe of the Republic of Singapore Air Force and Captain Randy Micklejohn of the Canadian Armed Forces. For our preview exercise, we were tasked with assessing the Chinook against a specification. In addition to the handling tests, we flew instrument and night flying and assessed the aircraft during tactical low-level operations, which included load lifting and confined areas.
All operations with a risk of bird strikes.
As the transit height was reduced, the dangers from wires and bird strike would increase. The aircraft's ability to withstand bird strike could not be determined.
The Chinook presentation, like all the others, is classified, but the 3 students used some unclassified film shot for this series. They did not add a commentary or sound, which was to prove detrimental.
My portion of the presentation will deal with the Chinook's capabilities as it leaves the rear area for the second time, as it continues on a typical mission sortie. For its first task, then, the Chinook will be transporting internally a Ferret scout car. As shown here, the Ferret can be driven directly into the cargo compartment of the aircraft.
The presentations are seen as a shop window for the fledgling test pilots. They are able to display their fitness for their future careers to their prospective employers.
Cargo that is too heavy or awkward.
I'm looking for somebody who can relate the work he does here and the product that he's working on, the aircraft or the equipment, directly to the way it'll be used on the front line. It's no good having, especially at this establishment, at Boscombe Down, people who get stuck into academics to the extent that they lose sight of the reason for their being here, and that is to, in a sense, safeguard the interests of the operator on the front line and to ensure that at the end of the day we're able to make the best of the equipment which is being procured for the services.
Gentlemen, we identified a number of deficiencies during our preview which made the Chinook unacceptable for the medium support helicopter role. If you have any questions, I'd be grateful if you'd address them through me.
Thank you very much indeed, team. If I can lead off with the first question.
The Chinook preview tutor, Squadron Leader Ian Young. Again, the questions, testing the quality of understanding. All part of the presentation and the final assessment of the students as test pilots.
To the battle area.
Yes, that was a problem which we encountered, well, not a problem, but the aircraft control response was sluggish at that weight, and we felt that at high all-up weight you may not have sufficient control response to operate at low level. In addition to that, vibration levels are obviously increased at high weight, and also we had some experience with the Lord mounts breaking along.
The questions go on, a good sign, as is the applause at the end. But the real test comes later, when the tutors meet to discuss the work and award the vital marks.
Timing was spot on, Mike, at
Excellent, yeah.
40
minutes exactly.
So for that they get an excellent mark. The visual aids, what did you think of the visual aids?
The prepared slides are very good, and it gave a good feel for the operation of the aircraft in the forward area. My only area of concern, I think, was with the use of that film clip in the middle, which could have been relevant if it was talked over properly, but it seemed that it was something that was just put in as an afterthought, and the audience were left watching something without any sound for about a minute or so, without any real constructive comment from the team. Otherwise, the VAs, the visual aids, were extremely good.
It was a bit disjointed there,
A
wasn't it?
little disjointed, yeah.
But they handled them well, didn't they? So I think that comes into the very good category.
Indeed,
So
yeah.
no problem there. The content and understanding of the subject. I thought it came across quite well there.
Dave Southwood and Harry Fail, who together previewed the F-18 Hornet in America, had a difficult task. The aircraft was a highly classified prototype and went unserviceable, reducing the permitted 10 hours of test flying to only 8. Nevertheless, Dave and Harry managed to produce their presentation.
Sir, gentlemen, good afternoon. This presentation is on a preview assessment of the TFA-18A Hornet performed by myself, Flight Lieutenant Dave Southwood, and my colleague, Hauptmann Harold Fail of the Deutsche Luftwaffe. The presentation is classified restricted. The preview was carried out to evaluate the two-seat Hornet as a trainer variant for the all-weather, low-altitude strike attack role, with a secondary all-weather fighter role. The aircraft was a two-seat tandem trainer variant of the single-seat aircraft with full mission capability.
The presentations are the culmination of the course. There are prizes to be won, but there are no grades. Students either pass or fail, though everything they do, up to and including the presentations, is relevant. Is there a definite cut-off point below which students are failed?
I would say that we had any firm level at which we say he passes or not. It's very much a feeling from all the members of staff, from the very close look we get at him over a year, and it's a feeling of confidence in him.
Sir, gentlemen, the Hornet's handling characteristics. Ground handling. The aircraft was steered on the ground by use of nose-wheel steering. The excellent 360-degree field of view allowed to clear both wingtips during ground operations. The only unsatisfactory item found was the selectable nose-wheel steering high mode. This mode gave a very small turn radius of 30 feet, but gave very jerky input.
The joint presentation continues. The Hornet is not a well-known aircraft in Europe. Consequently, interest in the syndicate's findings is genuine.
A further 64 unsatisfactory features were identified and should be improved. Although the Hornet was unacceptable for the assigned roles, the comprehensive weapon system gave it good potential. Gentlemen, this concludes our presentation. We would now be glad to answer questions.
Now, this airplane has an unusual cockpit configuration.
Vic Lockwood was the preview tutor. He flew the Hornet and knows its complex computerized instrumentation.
Impulsive warning to the pilot of an emergency.
There were some major warning conventional type of displays either side of the head-up display, but most cautions came up on the left digital display indicator. The cautions came up as green words on top of green symbology on the background, and very often three or four letter groups would come up to indicate what the nature of the problem was. And this was also very confusing on top of all the green symbology, especially as the stores management display that was normally on the left DDI had a lot of information on it.
Do you have any problems with the programming of that in the flight envelope?
None at all. It worked very well. And even with very harsh rapid inputs, there was no noticeable adverse yaw. And it really was very easy to roll out precisely on a head.
There is, at the conclusion, no doubt that this presentation has gone well, despite the difficulties.
The team have done a very good job on the aircraft. And thank you very much for this afternoon's presentation. Well done.
I thought it was very good. It's an incredibly difficult task. It's a very, very complex airplane that it was very, very difficult to present in such a short space of time. And I think being presented with that task, they did very well indeed.
It was interesting because it was a pre-production model again, and it was one that an early stage of its development. And so it was very interesting to see what an aircraft like that went through, and I think they did an extremely good job to find out all the problems they did.
And so the 44th course of the Empire Test Pilot School draws to its end. All the students have passed. The ones from the UK will be posted for a 3-year tour to the British test centres.
Well, at Farnborough and Bedford, they'll be doing pure research into flight systems, aerodynamics, stability control, modern control systems, modern weapon systems. This is research that's aimed at 15 years ahead and will eventually be picked up by the manufacturers and hopefully incorporated in next generation aircraft. The test pilots at Boscombe Down are dealing with a much nearer future. They're dealing with what we call release to service, i.e. assessing an aircraft for its role and defining the flight envelope and the techniques that the frontline pilots will be using whilst operating that aircraft.
For the moment, all that now remains is the traditional formal dinner in the Boscombe Down mess, when the certificates and prizes are awarded, the premier prize being the coveted McKenna Trophy.
The McKenna salutes the man who's done very well and come out on the top of the course overall. And we find that he's a worthy winner. Normally the other students say, yes, he's the man that should get it.
All the staff and guests are present. Most of the officers here are test pilots or ex-test pilots, including the guest of honor, Admiral Sir Raymond Ligo. The dinner is, however, strictly stag. Well, almost. All the overseas students can invite their air attaché. Singapore doesn't have an air attaché in London, so JT invited the first secretary, Madame Lou, only the second lady ever to attend the McKenna.
Mr. President, Admiral Ligo, Air Marshal Rogers, Commandant, distinguished guests, lady and gentlemen. Since 1945, the McKenna dinner has been held annually to celebrate the metamorphosis of the graduating course into fully fledged test pilots and to present trophies to those who appear to have performed this wriggling act best.
The highlight of the evening, the presentation of the prizes introduced by the boss, Wing Commander John Bolton. But first, a tradition to be observed.
Thank you, sir, lady and gentlemen. As boss of this school, I must ensure that I'm properly dressed for the occasion. Mr. Roberts, the titfer, please. This end, I think. Thank you very much. So, the titfer was presented to the school for use on such occasions by Air Marshal Sir Ralph Sawley in 1944. Sir Ralph was a distinguished test pilot of the 20s and 30s and a previous commandant of this establishment. Tonight we graduate 10 fixed-wing and 5 rotary-wing test pilots. As you've heard, they've been a well-motivated bunch and were well led by their senior student, Squadron Leader Robin Tidyman. It has been a pleasure to have them here. Amongst the group, we have our first graduate from Singapore, and for the first time since 1945, we have a New Zealander on the course. Having listened to him after a party at Easter's extol the virtues of early aerodynamic research, supposedly performed in Maori wind tunnels, I think it might be another 42 years before we accept another. Now, the Americans are renowned for being laid back. How is this for a cool test pilot? Tom Coulter came to me during the spinning phase of the course in all seriousness and said, "Boss, if the weather's bad tomorrow and I can't do that spinning trip, I'm going to get married." And he did. I ask you, sir, to honor the school by presenting the graduation certificates. Firstly, to number 44, fixed-wing course. Commandant Serge Aubert of the French Air Force.
Serge is to join a French Air Force trials team in Britain.
Flight Lieutenant Nick Coulson, Australian Air Force.
Nick will be test flying heavy transports from Edinburgh, South Australia.
Lieutenant Harry Fail of the German Air Force.
Who will be at Manching, working with the Tornado test team.
Lieutenant Tom Coulter, United States Navy.
Tom is to join a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier suitability unit at Patuxent River.
Flight Lieutenant Jim Ludford, Royal Air Force.
Is to become a member of a trial squadron at Boscombe Down, working on advanced Harrier projects.
Flight Lieutenant Steve Moore, Royal New Zealand Air Force.
Steve is now New Zealand's one and only serving military test pilot.
Squadron Leader Robin Tidyman, Royal Air Force.
Robin is to be part of the Boscombe Down team, developing the RAF's TriStar tanker transports.
Major Mirko Zuliani, Italian Air Force.
The popular Italian will be at Pratica di Mare, Rome, testing tornadoes.
Now the members of number 23 Rotary Wing Course. Lieutenant Al Howden, Royal Navy.
Al is destined for D Squadron here at Boscombe Down for helicopter trials.
Captain Ko Yun Tae, Singapore Air Force.
And his former preview colleague, JT, will be doing similar work in Singapore.
And finally, Captain Randy Meiklejohn, Canadian Armed Forces.
The Canadian is posted to a test centre with the rather appropriate name Cold Lake. Apart from their certificates, several prizes were also awarded. Les Evans and Serge Aubert took the Hawker Hunter Trophy, awarded for the best preview. A moment of satisfaction, as they were two-thirds of a syndicate which only 2 months previously had delivered the worst. Les will be testing Harrier systems at Bedford. Bob Horton, who is also posted to Bedford, received the Westland Trophy, presented to the Rotary Wing student, considered to be the runner-up to the major prize.
Finally, the McKenna Trophy. The trophy is awarded to the best all-round student. I ask our guest of honour to present this coveted award to Flight Lieutenant Dave Southwood, Royal Air Force. Thank you, sir. Well, congratulations again.
For most, the only tangible reward is the certificate. That and the right to add the letters TP after their name. And, of course, the relief that it is all finally over.
I don't care what they say about Westlands. I think they're all right.
But I had no prejudice electric.
You'd like to start over and do it again?
No. Yes, if I can use the same reporters this year. Just for the flying.
I'm very glad the course is over. Very glad.
Ah, well worth it.
Here's to it. Well done, Bob.